Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So here's another deck profile for you guys today. This time it's on Red Dragon Archfiend. Another cool deck, which all came from a structure deck. And yeah, this deck actually can do quite a lot of cool things. Now, it may not be the best deck in the format, but I mean, it can easily throw someone off guard if you play your cards correctly. And that's one of the things I like about this deck. It's very synchro focused, so, but other than that, like, yeah, I like what this deck can really do. And it's got a gimmick of just like being able to help you win through time if you need to. Because like there are some burning effects and so forth. So, but anyway, let's go and get started. So my main deck is 40 cards. I'm playing 3 copies of Soul Resonator. This is your main starter. If it's normal or special summon, you can add any 1 level 4 or lower fiend monster from your deck to your hand, except itself. Also, you can add special summon monsters from your extra deck for the rest of the turn, except dark synchro monsters, but I mean, that's fine. That's pretty much all we play. It also has a built-in protection effect where if a card you control would be destroyed by a card effect, while you control a Red Dragon Archfiend or a synchro monster that mentions it, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. So, yeah, Soul Resonator is pretty strong. Next up, Vision Resonator. I'm only playing this at 2. If there's a level 5 or higher dark monster on the field, you can just special summon this card for free. It's a tuner monster as well. And if this card is sent to the graveyard, and it doesn't matter from where, by the way, you can add 1 spell or trap that mentions Red Dragon Archfiend from your deck to your hand, and we do have a couple targets for that. Next up, 2 copies of Synchron Resonator. I know some people bumped this down to 1. I still like to play 2 because, like, especially if you want to take full advantage of Red Rising Dragon's effect, that's why I play this at 2. If a synchro monster is on the field, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can only special summon Synchron Resonator once per turn this way. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can target 1 Resonator monster in your graveyard, add it back to your hand. So, good way to recycle resources. The only part that is once per turn is the special summoning clause, but if it's sent to the graveyard, you can always recycle your synchro or your other Resonator monsters, which is really nice. I'm only playing 1 Crimson Resonator simply because you can bring this out fairly easily. So yeah, as long as you can get it to the graveyard as soon as possible, you can definitely kind of abuse the heck out of Red Rising Dragons. So yeah, it gets pretty nuts. Moving forward to the non-tuners of the deck, playing 3 copies of Red Lotus King Flame Crime. So this is a card that came from Battles of Legend. It's pretty busted actually. During the main phase, if you control a Fiend Tuner monster or a monster that controls, or your opponent controls a special summon monster, quick effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if this card is special summon, you can inflict 400 damage to your opponent for each fire monster you control with different names. And funny enough, this monster is a fire monster, so it can in fact include itself. Soul Resonator is a fire monster, so yeah, you can kind of see where this is going. So yeah, Flame Lotus King is pretty strong, but it also has a pretty neat effect if it's used as synchro material. So when it is used as synchro material, you can send 1 normal trap from your deck to your grave, and it can be any normal trap you want. And this is where like one of the main win cons of this deck comes into play, so we'll get into that momentarily. Next up, 3 copies of Bone Archfiend. This is a card that did come from the structure deck, and it's also pretty strong too. If this card is in your hand or your graveyard, you can send 1 other card from your hand or field to the grave and special summon this card. Of course, it does have the locking you out from Dark Dragon Synchro monsters, but again, that's fine. That's all we play anyway. You can target 1 face-up monster you control that has a level, send 1 Fiend Tuner from your hand or deck to the graveyard, and if you do, you can either increase or decrease that monster's level by 1. And that is pretty necessary because, you know, level manipulation is probably one of the key things you need to do in this deck. Moving forward, 2 copies of Earthbound Prisoner Stone Sweeper. Just for context, you're only going to use its hand effect, so you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, and then, or you can discard this card, add 1 level 3 or lower Fiend Tuner monster from your deck to your hand. So again, this is basically just another way to search out our Resonator monsters, because like that we don't have to just rely on Resonator calls. So it's like you're playing 5 copies of it. And just for like additional like extenders, you know, I am playing the 1 Wandering King Wildwind. If you control a Fiend Tuner with 1500 or less attack, which all of them do, you can just special summon this card. And of course, this card also has a searching effect too, so that's pretty nice. And of course, the 1 Obsessive Uvia Loop, so another great tuner monster to have in this deck. I am running a small Bystial package, so I'm playing 2 Libellion, 1 Magnemite, 1 Druis, and 1 Baldrake. No Sarnier because I'm not running like a big branded package or anything like that, no. They're just to help not only act as good at disruption, but Bystial Libellion does give me access to 1 specific trap card, which I'll get to in a second. So, but yeah, I like the Magnemite Druid Worm, and Baldrake, especially because, like I said, they're basically disruption, and they can also act as removal, especially for Druid and Baldrake, so that can come up quite a bit. Alright, so moving on here. For my hand traps, I'm only running 6 of them, so 3 Ash, 3 Imperm, and that's about it. Alright, now moving on to my other spell and trap lineup. Playing 3 copies of Resonator Call, searches any Resonator monster. 3 Crimson Gaia, this is basically what you're going to search off of Vision Resonator. But if you already have this in your opening hand, we do have 1 additional target. But anyway, during your main phase, you can add 1 Red Dragon Archfiend or 1 card that mentions it from your deck or graveyard back to your hand. So like if you lose your red zone, for example, you can add it back to your hand. So yeah, it's always handy when it comes up. Only 1 triple T this time because I didn't want to go past 40 cards. 1 Called by the Grave. And like I said, if you play your cards correctly, you should be able to play around Disruption. Just watch out for nibs. But other than that, it's not too bad. For the rest of the traps, 1 Red Rain, this card's pretty nuts, especially now that we have a way to actually get to it. So if you control a level 8 or higher synchro monster, banish all monsters on the field except monsters with the highest level. Also, the remaining face-up monsters on the field are unaffected by other card effects. So this can be very detrimental to your opponent, especially if they're not like, if their monsters' levels are lower than your own. So yeah. Also, if a Dark Dragon Synchro monster is synchro summoned onto your field while this card is in your graveyard, this card can recycle itself back to your hand. So yeah, Red Rain is pretty nuts. 1 Red Zone, another searchable target for Vision Resonator. It's basically disruption, and it's also a sort of Monster Reborn-esque effect for your Dark Dragon Synchro monster. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And then, of course, last but not least, we're playing the 1 Etude of the Branded. This is what we generally use to bring out with Lebellion's effect. During either player's turn, you can immediately, after this effect results, synchro summon 1 synchro monster using monsters on the field, including a dragon monster. And we do have a lot of dragons, in fact. And also, while you control a Bystial monster, you can banish any monsters that would be sent to your opponent's graveyard as tributes for their ritual summons or material for their fusion, synchro, and link summons. So yeah, Etude of the Branded can be very nasty since it's sort of like, basically like a dimensional barrier. And yeah, your opponent's going to have a rough time if they keep losing their resources, especially like if they're on Fiendsmiths, which do require them to be used as link material up until they can get into the fusion stuff. So yeah, Etude of the Branded can just like basically put that engine on check. But anyway, that's it for the main deck. Now let's move on to the extra deck. For my extra deck, I'm playing 3 copies of Red Rising Dragon. Gotta play this at 3 because it's like your main enabler. When this card is synchro summoned, you can target 1 Resonator monster in your graveyard to special summon it. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn except Dark Dragon Synchros, when again, no problem. During the main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard, target 2 level 1 Resonator monsters in your graveyard, special summon them. So yeah, this card's pretty cool. I like it. Next up, 2 copies of Red Dragon Archfiend. This card's name becomes Red Dragon Archfiend while on the field or in the grave, so that's really good. If this card is sent to from the monster zone to the graveyard, you can special summon the original Red Dragon Archfiend from your extra deck, and this is treated as a synchro summon. And then if this card was sent there to the graveyard as a synchro material for a Dark Dragon Synchro monster, you basically get to Raigeki all attack position monsters your opponent controls, so that can come up potentially. Next up, 2 copies of the original Red Dragon Archfiend. So we already know what this does, especially if you're an Edison player. Yeah, this card can be pretty nuts. Playing the 1 Queeble. As y'all know, I pulled an Ultra from my Megatons. So yeah, glad to finally see this got a holo reprint. 1 Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend. It's a board nuke on special summon monsters, and it can also inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent, so that can come up too. I finally decided to give Void Ogre Dragon. I wish I had the holo printing of this, but I only got the common. But it's a spell and trap negate so long as you have no cards in hand. And yeah, that's nothing else I can say about that. 1 Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss. I may cut the Void Ogre for a second copy of this, but we'll just have to wait and see. But so far, yeah, Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, it's basically an Omni negate, but you have to target 1 face-up card your opponent controls to negate its effects. 1 Red Dragon Archfiend Bane, a monster reborn. You have to tribute a monster you control as cost, but I mean, that's still pretty good because it can bring back your synchros. And then next up, 1 Tyrant Red Dragon Archfiend. Glad I got the QCR. So It's basically like Void Ogre Dragon. It can negate spells and traps, but only during the battle phase. But I like it because it basically helps you out evenly match. It's also a board nuke, but of course, it's once you do that effect, you have to. This is the only monster that can attack. But I mean, that's still pretty good overall. One Bystial Dispatter, definitely one of the best synchros in the deck. It's also a monster negate, and again, pretty easy to make considering that, yeah, since we are on the Bystial lineup. And finally, one Red Supernova Dragon. This card is crazy because it banishes everything and it gets bigger. So, yeah, Red Supernova Dragon ain't something to scoff at. Yeah, it requires 3 tuners, but I mean, for this deck, that's relatively easy. So, yeah, don't sleep on Red Supernova Dragon. Alright, now moving on to the side deck. Playing 3 copies of Phantasme. As I mentioned before, this is basically a budget alternative to the Molcharmies. 3 Ghost Mourner, just a way to help me play through time as well. So, yeah, it's basically Effect Veiler and so forth. 3 Joel Lockbird. 2 Cosmic Cyclone and a Harpy's Feather Duster just to deal with back row. And 3 copies of IDP. I do love IDP a lot, so yeah. I think for this format, IDP is going to be one of the best side cards, so definitely test it out if you haven't already. But anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will catch you guys again next time.